let me thank all of you for coming, and let me take just a moment to give you some idea of where we are and what we're doing. Because if you'd asked me 3 months ago, would I be doing this and running for governor, I'd have chuckled. Because I really thought then Governor Perdue was going to run again, as I think most of you did. And I really thought she'd win re-election if she ran, even no matter what the polls were saying. Because I think she's taken on one of the toughest General Assemblies I've ever seen in my lifetime. And she was dealt a pretty sorry hand with the budget. The federal government provided, most of you may not know these numbers, North Carolina received almost $20 billion with a B in federal funds. Marvin, only about 10 of it flowed through the state budget. The rest of them went to counties, cities, directly to other areas, and to school systems. Had it not been for those dollars, we would have lost a lot of teachers, a lot of nurses, a lot of doctors in emergency rooms were paid through federal and state funds. A lot of problems would have hit. This country was as close to a depression as ever. You know, you're very smart people. You probably know all this. So I may be telling you something you don't know, or you know already. Truth is, internationally, we hear about all the money was pumped in. The federal government put a pretty good chunk, about 900 and some billion. Truth is, the Federal Reserve put in about 4 times that amount. And we did it internationally simply because everything was shut down. People tend to forget there was a time when credit cards were having a hard time. You couldn't buy anything on credit in '09, and it changed. So I only tell that to sort of set the stage of where we are today. Things are still tight. We made a lot of progress. When Governor Perdue announced she was not going to run, on a Friday morning, I think I heard it on the radio, and I got an email just about the time it hit. Folks said, you need to be looking at this, and I thought, well, no, I don't. A lot of these were staffers and friends, and we looked at it for a good long time before we got in. And most of you probably know we filed the last day. Now, that was somewhat by design, not by happenstance, because several of us were looking at it, and we agreed only one person should run. And I don't mind telling this now, it was Dan Blue. Dan and I agreed that one of us needed to run, but both of us would. And ultimately, he decided he wouldn't. He let me know. We knew probably 2 weeks out, but we waited. Why run for the governor in a time when things were as tight and tough as they are with such a short period of time? Because I can't remember a time in my lifetime when North Carolina is more at a crossroads. Education is under assault. I've never seen it when people who go in and work for children there are abused the way our teachers have been abused this year of people in public office. The Republicans in the General Assembly specifically. I can't remember that. They're the people who teach our children. I grew up in the county adjacent to this. Faye grew up in this county. Neither of my parents finished high school. But had it not been for public education, I wouldn't have had the opportunities I've had. I had the opportunity to be in business for 19 years. I was a county commissioner in this county for 4. I was a state legislator for 10, chaired the Appropriations Committee. I was state superintendent of schools for 8, and in Congress for 14. I've literally lived the American dream. But you don't get that chance unless you get started. And public education did it. And there are people right now who have it. There is absolutely an assault on public education in North Carolina at every level. You don't improve the economy by laying off teachers, laying off teacher assistants, get rid of those folks, capping enrollment at our university system, and saying to youngsters who want to, and adults who need a job, who want to go to our community college systems, you can't get in, because that's what's happening. I was there in the 80s when we expanded them as a General Assembly, did a lot of stuff. And I won't go through a long litany of stuff, because I've been doing stuff as long as I have, and you've done a lot of things. And you might ask the question, well, why in the world do you think you can be governor? Well, I think there are four things that you need to have in the governor. One, you need leadership. And Lord knows that's what it's going to take over the next few years. And I've had an opportunity to provide leadership for one of the largest state agencies, Department of Public Instruction, and in the recovery office for the governor over the last 7 or 8 months till we close that down. I've had an opportunity to provide legislative work. As a member of the North Carolina General Assembly, a member of the United States Congress, I chaired the Appropriations Committee in the House, chaired the Ag Committee, the Subcommittee on Ag that wrote the Farm Bill. And thirdly, what we need in a governor is someone who can reach compromise when you have to. And in my days from a county commissioner, all the way through my time as a member of the United States Congress, I learned to work across party lines when necessary, when you had to. But if you got, and then you got to be tough. You got to take tough votes. And I've been willing to take some very tough ones. Some of them that cost me a lot. I voted for the recovery bill. It was the right thing to do. I voted for the health care bill. Why? Because it's the right thing to do for America, right thing to do for business, but more importantly, it was the right thing to do for people. And I think history will prove that was the right thing in the long run. Already is. Let me thank you for coming. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the campaign, and then I'll take questions. I don't like Dr. Aziz to do this unless I take questions. I'm more of a back and forth to make it work. It looks good. We have, according to third-party polling, we have been leading in every independent poll that has been put out since we started. The first poll that was put out, we were up 7 points. The next poll that came out, we were up about 10. They released the poll yesterday. It's online. You can pull it down under the dome on the News Observer. It has not been printed yet because my wife Faye reminded me that they don't print under the dome on Saturdays except on web. It'll be out maybe tomorrow or Monday. We're still leading in double digits. The undecideds are closing. And the spread between myself and the Lieutenant Governor is about the same. And the third candidate on the ballot, among 6, I think, is polling at about 4%. So we got tremendous momentum. We're moving. There's 23 more days, I believe that's right, till May the 8th. And you'll start seeing TV ads in the very near future. They're expensive. And that's why I thank you so much for hosting this. Because if you're going to be on TV, you're going to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 a week. That is a very small buy. If you really want to do more, you can spend about $500,000 a week across this state because you go from the mountains to the coast. And the data that we saw says that this poll that they released on Saturday, the 3 top issues, and you know what they are. I don't need to tell you. Education, jobs, and the economy. Those 3. And they're off the chart. Finally, I have been busy. I spend part of my days on the telephone calling my friends and neighbors and others, raising money. In the evenings I'm traveling. I was in Brunswick County on Thursday night, meeting with about as many folks in the Q&A. I came back, worked in the office yesterday, took off yesterday afternoon, went to Charlotte, met with the editorial board. From there I went to Gastonia. We had a function last night. Back to Charlotte for the evening late. This morning I met with the Democratic County Convention there. We had a great convention. They were on fire. Well, I don't know how many people were there, several hundred. Education was the top issue. They're involved. From there I went to Orange County up at Hillsborough. From Hillsborough to Raleigh to here. Tomorrow I start all over again. Go back to Charlotte tomorrow night and then back. And then this week we'll have 3 debates. So far we've had 4. We've had 4 debates so far. All 3 of us have only been in 1 debate. The Lieutenant Governor did the one with educators. He was not able to make the one with Channel 11 ABC Network TV, nor the other 2. So we'll have 3 this week, and that's pretty much sure the end. But I appreciate you coming. I thank you for your hospitality. It is just terrific. May I take some questions?
Please.
No question, Bob. Just a comment. Having known you the number of years that I've known you, and knowing about your background in education and having actually served as state superintendent. And this is so vitally important to have someone with knowledge of education, because our children are our future. And I can tell you that Bob Etheridge knows education, and he knows jobs, and he knows the economy. He's right about the votes that he took in the stimulus. Were it not for that stimulus, General Motors would be underwater right now.
And now they're the #1 automaker in the world again.
Right, and back up. Chrysler was already dead.
Yep.
We brought him back from the dead. Your Congressman, Bob Etheridge, needs to get that credit for having done what he did. And heavens knows we need health care. Anybody who says that it's stupid to have health care is a stupid person. I mean, why would you not want to protect your body, your health? I get so weary of folk who feel like they don't need health care, and then they get sick and want you to sponsor a barbecue. We need to have the health care. You have a person who is seeing that vision. He will be an excellent governor, and let's give him our support.
Thank you, Mark. We found out that when you go to war, you spend a lot of money, and the only people who win in that situation is the military-industrial complex. I mean, literally. I don't think this president, he says he's going to keep all the stuff on the table, but I don't think he wants to do it. I think it'd be in all of us' best interest if it could be worked out through the multi-international organizations. I think everyone wins when you do that, because it's certainly the cost in national resources, international resources, would be astronomical at a time when we need those resources at home. And the loss of manpower on both sides would be huge. So I think right now you're getting a lot of saber rattling for some folks who I'm not sure Iran wants to do it either. I think they're just making noises too to get the kind of attention they want. We're winding down in Iraq finally. I think everybody gets out. I think the last troops have now left. And we're now moving to wind down in Afghanistan. I went to Iraq, I think 3 or 4 times, Afghanistan 3. And the sooner we get that situation settled and come home, the better off we're going to be, I think, because the cost is prohibitive. And as long as we're there, they don't really have to step up and do some of the things they really need to do. Last time I was in Kandahar, I flew in and went out to visit with the guys in the 82nd out on the countryside. I mean, the soldiers would tell you they told us, and that's been 18 months ago, it was time for us to come home. That's what the soldiers were saying. And I'm sure some of you in Fort Bragg are hearing that from wives and family members. And I agree with it.
You know, the mothers are saving the world, and what are you going to do as a governor to give more rights to the mothers? These single mothers are suffering, and I see, I'm a pediatrician, the entire family is suffering because fathers are not doing the job. That's number 1. Number 2, what is your position on religious tolerance? Those are 2 questions.
Well, the first question, truth is, that a lot of families really is more of a federal issue than a state issue, but we can help with it at the state level. Because we did some things when I was in Washington, not nearly enough, because a lot of these mothers, when they lose, or in some cases mothers are lost, there's more men than others, the families suffer for a long time, and the children suffer. And we need to really raise the amount of funding that they get once a soldier loses their life or becomes unable to work because of disability. The other one deals with the whole issue of whether or not or how we as a state, I'm think, work with the broader community. I mean, I think we have to. Too many times we don't reach out and have the kind of openness that we should have. We allow little groups to build up. I think the governor probably ought to go back to doing something Terry Sanford did 40, 50 years ago. He had like a good neighbor council, and it dealt with race relations. I think we need to do the same thing with the religion, because there was a time when, you know, people saw one religion, two religions. Now we are a state of multi-religions, multi-cultures, and we need to build a level of understanding. Really, education. It gets back to the very issue I talked about before. People just don't understand. And if you don't have an education, it's hard to explain to a person what it is. It's a lot easier for a person to take a position to be against. You know, it's sort of like a child. A child learns to say no before they learn to say yes. And you really ought to grow up with that as you get older. Some people never get beyond being a child in a lot of issues, and religious tolerance is part of that. They just don't have an understanding. I think we're going to see a lot of that in this election. With now, I'm not going to support Mr. Romney. I'm going to just tell that right out of the block. But you ought to disagree with him based on policy, not on what his religious beliefs are or otherwise. But there are going to be a lot of people who will take that as an issue, and I think that's the wrong place to be. I really believe that. You know, there hadn't been many. It's hard to believe that John F. Kennedy had to fight the battle on Catholicism for being Catholic. And I mean, that was a big issue in 1960. That was a huge issue. Thank goodness we're over that one now. I think.
In the fall, I suspect it's going to be somewhat of a nasty election. What kind of things do you think they're going to be attacking you for, and how are you planning on responding?
Well, I don't know how we're going to respond. It's going to be depending on how they're going to attack, but I promise you there will be untold number of attacks, whomever the nominee is. I mean, they did it to me last time when I ran for Congress. And let me speak to that right quick, because I think that's important. They caught me late one evening, and I probably should have handled it a little differently, but that's beside the point. The guy who did the clipping of the tape just died recently, Mark Crack. And the truth is, they took credit for having done it. In the New York Times the day after the election, they were proud that they thought it had hurt the campaign. Probably had some impact. I think our vote on health care was a big issue. And the guy who cut the ad and really fixed it was the same guy who did the Willie Horton ad, a guy named McCarthy. There's a piece in the New Yorker on it, because he's the same guy, after he did the Willie Horton ad, he got out of favor, sort of put him out, and then he started doing some more. Now he's doing all of Romney's negative ads. We're going to come at them full force. We're not going to let negativity, nasty, ugly things keep North Carolina from moving forward. We just can't let that happen. If we do, we're in deep trouble. I think we can handle that. I think there'll be enough resources to get, because really it's all about money. I mean, these guys call themselves Americans for Prosperity are far from being prosperous. They're taking big oil money and big money from the Koch brothers out of New York, who are getting people to work and vote against their own best interests. Against their own best interests. That's shameful. But the answer will be ready. I would hope we'd be talking about it. The reason they come up with those things and run out all these negative issues, I mean, we wouldn't have Amendment 1 on the ballot this time if it weren't for the fact they don't have a good answer for education and jobs. So if you don't have those issues, what do? You run out social issues to get people to fight on stuff that at the end of the day, you shouldn't all be putting in the Constitution anyway. So, but that's what it's about.
My name is Naveed Aziz, and I'm a practicing cardiologist in LMS County.
Thank you, and I hope I don't need your services, but if I do, I know where you are.
I got two questions.
Yes, sir.
You know, the state has cut down on the mental health services. Last week I saw a patient, she is 80 years old, she was agitated, psychotic, in my practice, I could not handle her, I have about 4 or 5 psychiatrists in my building. None of them were ready to take her as a patient because the state has cut down on the funding. She has Medicare and Medicaid. Our hospital was full, ER, because we have to take care of mental health center, mental health patients.
Sure.
I want how you're going to improve that, number one. Number two is, what's your position on tort reform for the doctors, to protect doctors?
What was the last part?
Tort reform for the...
Tort reform.
Yeah.
Well, I think General Assembly took on some of that tort reform last time, but the more important piece deals with funding mechanism for mental health, just like education. You can't fix the problem unless you're willing to put the resources in, and it's patently unfair to the individual and to us as a society for those people, for people to be outside who are sick that we could help, that wind up in prison. Because a lot of them wind up, as you well know, when we don't help. And I think our mental health system in this state right now is virtually broken. Why is it in the conditions it's in? It's not Marvin's fault. It's because over the years, we really haven't had those champions in the General Assembly that used to be there. When I was in the General Assembly, we had a fellow named Ken Royal from Durham. Ken was a champion for mental health. I'd hope Martin Nesbitt would pick it up. They have to have a champion of somebody, not just as a member, somebody that sits on that appropriations committee or on the Ways and Means committee that has the muscle and the resources to make sure we put it out. Because it takes money. You know that. Right now, if they don't have someone who's caring, it's like in education. If we'll fund that and then fund the pieces on mental health and others, we're going to get there. We have one of the best healthcare systems in the world. In the world. But not for everybody. That's why we passed the healthcare bill. If you don't have access to it, it doesn't make a difference how good it is. Same true with mental health, as you just talked. So we have to be willing to pay our fair share to get there. And that's what it's going to take.
My name is Maria Sheikh. I work for Bunnlevel in Morrisville. And my question was pertaining to jobs. With the cost of labor being as different as it is between U.S. and China and other countries, how do you foresee jobs coming back to North Carolina, and what incentives you think can be offered to make that happen?
Great question, dealing with incentives and movement. I wish we didn't have to put in incentives. I think the state's going to continue to do it and have to do it to compete. I think the biggest piece, and part of it is beyond the state, it's really national. The state, at the national level, don't know to get at it real soon, but we have to change some tax policy at the federal level. I was part of signing on to a piece of legislation that did that, so that we don't incentivize moving jobs offshore versus having them here, because we do have that tax policy now. But the bigger piece, in terms of the jobs, the cost of energy now, if it stays where it is, if it doesn't go down pretty quick, it's going to be a whole lot more attractive to manufacture in the United States than it is to move it offshore, because transportation costs will offset whatever the other costs are. And we're seeing, if you follow the trends in this recovery we're having, it's relatively slow, but you know where the most jobs are being created? In manufacturing. So I really believe manufacturing is coming back. It is important to have manufacturing come back, simply because they pay benefits, they cover good health care benefits and others. And one of the advantages of having a health care policy at the federal level is that relieves the businesses of the heavy health care costs if they can start sharing it, so manufacturing becomes more attractive in the United States, not less attractive. And I think that's a good federal state policy that we can work together on. And the nice thing about having somebody who's worked in Washington and have the opportunity, you learn how to work across federal state lines and work with folks to get things done. And I've enjoyed that.
My name is Ghulam Sheikh. I am a physician in Garner, North Carolina. I have a question. We are losing a lot of skilled workers in North Carolina, and there is a scarcity of the jobs and all this. A lot of it is also we are not producing skilled workers either. I think one of the reasons for that is also we have not invested in our education system. And lately, what I heard is we are 28 million short in budget as far as education, and they are talking about the laying off the teachers, cutting down the buses. That will affect more primary, secondary education as well as vocational and skill, education, including community college and universities. As a governor, what you are going to do to reverse this trend and maybe, supplement them so that they can, really fulfill their obligation, educating children and all this.
You've given half my campaign speech. On that, thank you. The other part is you've got to, you really, it's imperative that education becomes the first priority. It's got to be. Everything else will drive off that. And we've been able to do that over the years. I think the other piece is that as you educate people, as the governor gets out and speaks and moves around, and you start to generate working with business community and across this state, people understand you have to invest. I've always said education is an investment. You spend money on prison. If you listen to a lot of Republicans talk, what they say is, we spend money on, we can't throw money at school. We can't keep spending that money or throwing it out. But let me tell you something. When I see teachers and PTAs having cupcake sales to provide supplies for the classroom, we haven't been throwing a lot of money at schools. I have been very supportive of our military. Always have, because before I spent 2 years in the Army, but truth is, last time I checked, we send somebody off to fight a war, we don't tell them they got to panhandle while they're gone. We're going to give them whatever money they need. If we did that for public education at every level, you would see dramatic things change. And I think part of the reason we're where we are is one of the questions we raised earlier, Bahan raised it on money going overseas. Every dollar we send overseas in fighting a battle, and some of them we need to fight, okay, there'll be some we need to do. But the point is, when you send money over there, it never comes back home. It does not come back home. We spent that money here, putting in roads, bridges, building schools, paying teachers, investing in our community college, making sure we had the brightest people in our universities. We would churn out jobs here that would continue, because jobs sort of grow. It's like a metamorphosis. You create a new idea, burns a job, there's a life cycle of the jobs, and then the new ones come. That's what we need to do, reinvest those dollars here at home. Thank you.